I'm Sean Fennessey.
I'm Amanda Dobbins.
And this is The Big Picture, a conversation show about freaks, weirdos, psychos, monsters, ghouls, sickos. Today on the show, we will talk about 5 freaky new movies that hit theaters this month. But first...
Oasis.
Okay.
No, let's
you want to start there?
Let's just bring everybody in.
We've been on vacation, sort of. I was not on vacation last week, unfortunately for me. But some things have transpired. There's been some movie news that we could talk about.
Right.
But as soon as we walked in, I could feel between us that we were both like, can we talk about Oasis? Like, we both...
And so I think this episode is going out simultaneous with, like, the official announcement.
Yes.
The announcement is supposed to be August 27th. We're recording this on August 26th.
Okay.
We've gotten some, a lot of leaked info, but it seems like there's enough that it's really happening this time. And Oasis...
Yes, the English rock band.
A signature band of our youth.
Yes.
And also just like one of the most legendary brotherly feuds of all time. And something that this show spiritually could aspire to in a lot of ways, I think. If we have to go out, let's go out like them.
I think we have huge Noel and Liam energy. Without question, you are obviously Liam by a mile. You are the most Liam person I've ever known.
I'm just glad that you know that. I feel really good about that, but I'm glad that you also know.
So when this broke, and there had been long rumors for years that they would get back together, that they were milking this to get back together to make this as big an impact as possible. And I have had huge ups and downs with my Oasis fandom over the years, and I have been in a big high for the last year. So when this hit, I was really excited. But the playlist that I looked up and subscribed to yesterday when this really started cooking is called Noli G Has Pipes, Actually. And it's all the songs, the Oasis songs that Noel sings.
Okay.
And,
that's,
I'm a Noel. I'm a Noel.
Sure, but that is like major loser energy.
Sure, whatever you want.
What I did yesterday is I just went back and I was just like reading Liam's Twitter posts for a while. Then I watched that video he did with Vice like 10 years ago where it's like him and a bunch of children.
Kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
It's so good.
When the little kid asks, do you get treats after your concerts?
Like,
and he's like, yeah, sort of. Oasis are wonderful. They have nothing to do with movies, really, except I did just tell the story of me and Chris and your husband going to see Supersonic, the A24 documentary about Oasis up until, I forget what year it was, 1997, or it's that moment when Talk Tonight happens and Noel leaves and they go kind of on their split, which I think is a really fun and great documentary that actually was reissued as part of that IMAX program that A24 was doing. But after we saw that movie, your husband famously said Oasis is not good, which just destroyed Chris and I.
So first
destroyed
of all,
us.
So first of all, number one, and he informed me that he received an invitation to appear on this podcast sometime soon.
He did. And he can make amends on that day.
Well, I hope you're listening. He he was like, why didn't you invite me? And I was like, it's between you and Sean. Because number one, it is on record that his post-screening movie opinions don't always hold up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's another future episode with Zach.
By the way, that's why all the long lead publicists listening should let me go with Zach to see the movies, because you'll get a more favorable response. Number two, he doesn't speak for me or for our family. Okay. And you were trying to other me from this. And I was like literally hatching. I was like, okay, so Cannes 2025, F1 definitely going to hit Cannes, probably out of competition.
Mm-hmm.
But we finally make our debut on the Croisette.
Yep.
And then, we're already across the pond. So maybe we have a little vacation time of our own.
Sure.
And then we hit London. We can do some London programming. I would really love to go back to the Prince Charles Cinema.
Yeah.
They're just doing great work over there. And then we can go to Oasis. I don't know how we would justify that in a context of a podcast about movies, but whatever.
Is the idea going to be like 30 nights at Wembley? Like, what is it going to be all over the place, all over Europe?
Right now, and again, as of this recording, all we know are rumors. So 10 nights at Wembley.
Okay.
Headline in Glastonbury, and then 10 nights in Manchester.
I mean, that's the Matt Healy. That's what Matty Healy asked for a year and a half ago in that very famous video.
Yeah.
Where he was like, you're too busy modding. Stop modding.
His greatest moment.
It really was. Complicated 18 months for that guy. Oasis, I'm just delighted. I'm delighted. Are they a wildly derivative band? Yes.
1000%.
Are they amazing? Yes.
Was I 10 when What's the Story Morning Glory came out?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was 12, but
Is
same
it
difference.
Hugely important to me? Yes.
Yeah, they rock. It's kind of perfect that on the Sicko mode episode that we're just being sickos about these two incredibly rude, dickish
so what's
blokes.
your ticket strategy here?
I'm a very connected person, so I'm sure I can figure it out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you better be nicer
London?
to me, Liam.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, we're fortunate to work at Spotify.
Sure.
You know, maybe we know someone who knows someone. We can figure something out. You pointed out to me before we started recording that you really got to go in those first few days.
Yeah.
Because things could really go awry here. You know, like the fight could start quickly.
And I also I don't think that I have earned the Manchester energy. You know, like I think that there's something where if they make it that far, it's really, that's not for us. That's not for Americans. That's for the homegrowns.
There's something really enticing about Glastonbury, though. I've never been to Glastonbury.
Yeah.
I'm not a festival person at this stage of my life.
Like a festival either.
But that moment will be an amazing moment.
It will. I think I would prefer London personally.
Okay.
Again, you do if you're gonna arrange your entire family's life around this, you do actually want to get to see the concert. You know.
Good news for me is my wife likes Oasis, and frankly, I will start the mission to make my daughter like Oasis now.
I don't know what you're talking about if you're listening to this because we spent all weekend talking about this.
I don't know what to say.
We're just like in line at the playground, like text, you know, wherever, just texting each other, being like, "Can you believe this Oasis thing? Like, do you think it's true? How are we going to get there? What are we going to do?" And he has been like very on board.
Yeah, this is our Fleetwood Mac. This is when Fleetwood Mac came back in the 90s.
I play Oasis in the home for the child. He doesn't turn it on, but that's okay.
I mean, I'm going. As soon as I saw it, I texted Chris and said, "I'm going." So.
You know, sometimes you can put me on the text chain. He doesn't speak for me.
I understand.
All right.
I understand. We don't have to be in dispute about this. Okay. We can be united in going to see Oasis in London. I promise.
Great.
We can be united.
If anyone has any tips, I'm serious. Email us. We're just like two old people in Los Angeles.
Speaking of live events, I wanted to say thank you to the kind people at American Cinematheque and the Arrow Theater. We screened Gone Girl there as part of the Friend of the Fest series that they've been doing, where they host various screenings from podcast hosts. It is ongoing. Find tickets if you're interested. We met many incredibly kind listeners, engaged listeners. I always feel a little weird meeting listeners because I know they know so much about me. And
I know, and then also, and it is weird.
It is weird.
If we're just voices. Yeah. And I understand this because like if I also listen to podcasts, I don't listen to this one because that would be horrifying.
Whose podcast would you go to a live event for at this stage of your life?
Jessie Ware. Table Manners.
Yeah, I know you love her.
Oh my God, have both Gallaghers on Table Manners and then invite me, Jessie Ware.
Oh, Noel and Liam.
Yeah,
that sounds great.
Yeah,
I thought you meant Jason Gallagher.
Well, that would be nice too.
Okay. Different Gallagher.
I enjoy all of his and his son's work. Otherwise, it's mostly I just listen to Ringer podcasts, so I do get that experience.
Would you go to Bill Simmons live?
I mean, that would be a fascinating sociological experiment.
Just Bill for 2 hours.
I mean, I do worry that I would get tomatoes thrown at me by that audience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
What do you mean?
I don't know. That's not the most receptive audience always to
you.
Yeah.
No,
there's
come on.
An overlap.
Dob.
Sure,
you're good.
That's true.
How many times did you hear the phrase Dob
I heard
on Friday?
So many, and I just want to thank all the girlfriends also. You know, because there were plenty of women who listened to the podcast on their own.
Yep.
Shout out our friend who was just like, I watched Heat at the nail salon. It was like, I don't know, you guys talk a lot about it. And it was like, so I did Heat. And then I think she just like did a Michael Mann run at the nail salon.
I think she said also Miami Vice.
Yeah. So, but, and that's, you know, there are women who are on their own listening to the big picture. And I love all of you. And then we did meet a couple like nice women just standing there. And
I've
they
never
were very
heard your podcast, but my boyfriend will not stop talking about it. We get that a lot. We do get that a lot. And thank God for them.
I appreciate all of that.
Met more than one guy in a letterboxd hat. Met one guy wearing a shirt that said physical media. I'd like to thank that man for being alive.
We FaceTime with someone in Long Island.
We did. Some psycho who stayed up till 1:30 in the morning.
And left a voicemail for someone, or a voice memo for someone in Chile. I hope that was okay. This is at some point like the generations start to, you know, they're more comfortable with voice memos than we are. Mm-hmm. And we don't know what we're doing. Even with the selfies, I'm like, I need you guys to art direct this.
Yeah. I learned that voice memo that we sent out was actually an information gathering psyop by an AI company, and they're using it to make the bigger picture.
Right.
And it's just
unlike literally
Dean
everything else.
And Scamanda and two new voices that are bringing all the news and reviews about movie world. It was a nice event. I was happy to be invited.
Also, if you haven't seen Gone Girl in a while, this is a great time to rewatch Gone Girl.
We looked very smart. Programming that movie, we suggested it weeks and weeks ago, and obviously things have blown up in the world of Ben Affleck.
Listen, it wasn't like the outlook was good.
No, but
this has been a summer-long drip, but the filing of the divorce papers, the reveal of the no prenup, and just a really remarkable PR assault in People magazine by Jennifer Lopez's team really all just came together for us.
I noticed that Jimmy Butler of the Miami Heat is in her DMs
That's
right
great.
now. Isn't that exciting? Incredible time here at the Big Picture where we don't talk about movies. Let's talk about a little bit about movies, sort of. There was one thing that happened in the world of movie news that I found extremely amusing, which is that a new trailer for Megalopolis was released last week, the new movie from Francis Ford Coppola. In that trailer, there were several quotes from reviews from past Coppola films.
Such as Apocalypse Now and The Godfather. Perhaps you've heard of them.
Yes. Also, Bram Stoker's Dracula was included there. The critics who those quotes were attributed to included Roger Ebert, Andrew Sarris, Pauline Kael, John Simon, some of the most known critics of the last 50 years. It was a very fun and funny trailer about how Francis Ford Coppola should never be underestimated. And then we saw some new images from the movie. And then within 6 hours, it was revealed. I think Bilda Abiri at Vulture is the one who really kind of identified this and just went and Googled these reviews to make sure that the quotes were falsified or that they had been rendered from AI, or it was unclear. But none of them, I think maybe one or two of them were real and everything else was completely manufactured. And in fact, like many of Roger Ebert's reviews of movies like Apocalypse Now were very positive.
Right.
So, Lionsgate took the trailer down immediately and were shamed publicly. And it sounds like a consultant who worked on the creation of this trailer was dismissed. I gotta say, I just think this is really funny. Like,
it was great.
There's no scandal here to me. Like, John Simon, the legend of John Simon and the legend of Andrew Sarris will be fine. And also Francis Ford Coppola will be fine. Whether he was like involved in this or not, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it, but who the hell knows?
It's a good idea because it's not like, okay, obviously these turned out to be fake. But people have doubted Francis Ford Coppola throughout his career, including before some of the greatest cinema masterpieces of all time were released. So the spirit was right. The execution, honestly, let's blame AI. Let's blame, fire Google, you know?
I'm on board with that. Two notes about it. One, this has already been done and done brilliantly. It was done best by the people who worked on the marketing for the movie Lost Highway, the David Lynch movie, when they put the Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel two thumbs down on the poster and pointed to that as a sign that this was clearly a work of art that you should be interested in. Two, the thing with Coppola is he's always doubted before or during production, but not after for the most part. This is the first time in a while where, Megalopolis got some bad reviews.
Right. Not the first time in a while, but the I would say the last 20 years have been a little bit of some chin scratching.
Not since Jack, your favorite Robin Williams movie, has he gotten such bad press. I mean, we're going to go see this movie soon, in theory.
Are we?
I hope so. If they'll show it to us.
Yeah.
If they don't show it to us, what are we going to do?
I guess we're going to go on Thursday night. I was looking at the schedule, and you really do have this on my last... You have the podcast on my last working day.
My hope is that we're going to be able to pre-record. I sure hope so too. My intention is to pre-record this episode.
But it would be really funny to go into labor at like a 10 a.m. screening of Megalopolis, sitting next to the two. You think you and Chris would handle it well?
You going into labor?
Yeah.
I've been there before. Chris has never been there. Chris doesn't know what to expect. I've lived through it. I know what it's like. It's complicated. I'm not saying it was easy, but at least I know what's coming down the pike, quite literally.
Yeah.
Chris,
Okay.
I wish him well. Should we talk about the movies? Was there anything else that happened over the break that you were like, oh, if we were doing the show this week, we would have done this? And by the way, thanks to Brian Raftery and the whole team who worked on the Hollywood Hack, which I thought was great.
If you haven't listened, please do. It was also nice. A lot of people at the event had listened to it and enjoyed it. I thought it turned out quite well. I liked working on it.
Nothing else for you.
Guillermo del Toro was in a haunted house or a haunted hotel.
Yeah, I did see that.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was actually my hotel. And we were happy to have Guillermo.
Screening, thing. Great.
Yeah, no, I really want to do that.
It's a really good idea.
We started talking about Halloween costumes with Alice this morning, and I was like,
"Oh, what's on the docket?"
Man, we're really getting there. Right now, we're very into Tiana from The Princess and the Frog.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So she's like,
I've never
Dad,
seen that one.
You are Naveen, but you are the frog.
When can
Naveen.
we do Disney Princesses episode with you?
I had Alice in the office on Friday.
I know.
And we were in the podcast studio, and we did record something that is actually sitting in Bobby's Lucid folder right now. I don't know if he realizes that. It's a 3-minute recording where I helped teach her how to say her full name into the microphone.
Okay.
She's ready to talk about princesses anytime you want.
Yeah.
She's locked and loaded. She knows it all.
But I would like your dissertation on the genre and the.
Well, when are we getting a princess movie next? That's really the question. I'm not sure if there's one in the docket.
Frozen?
Frozen 3, I believe, is planned for 2027. That's not a joke.
Okay.
I mean, Moana 2 in November.
But is that princess?
Yeah, I mean, she's meant to be the chief of the island, so it's essentially in the same lineage.
Okay.
I think Moana qualifies.
Okay.
Moana very big in our house, obviously.
Yeah, we haven't seen it yet.
Good film. Moana 2, I have my doubts. Originally meant to be a TV show.
Yeah, they don't have the Lin-Manuel.
No Lin-Manuel.
Songs.
It's a tough one.
Okay. That's your Halloween costume?
She wants to be Tiana. I'm not going to stop her.
All right, so we're not going spooky.
We'll see. She is really into ghosts.
Oh.
So maybe that'll work. We'll see. Let's talk about Blink Twice. Let's make that the first of the 5 films that we discuss. So this was the most successful at the box office of all the movies we're going to talk about this weekend.
Is that saying a lot?
It's not. It made $7.3 million. It's directed by Zoe Kravitz. This is her directorial debut. She's a co-writer on this movie with E.T. Feigenbaum. Quite a cast on the film. Naomi Ackie is the star, but Channing Tatum is on the poster, and he's sort of the central figure, well, I don't want to say too much yet, but Christian Slater, Simon Rex, Adria Arjona, who we just saw in Hitman, Haley Joel Osment, Kyle MacLachlan, Gina Davis, Aleya Shawkat. Very interesting and exciting cast. It's a movie about a cocktail waitress who becomes infatuated with a billionaire, and she goes to an event.
Is that fair? I was going to say she's working at a catering event.
Well, we know because we see her watching a video of him before the event.
Okay.
So she's kind of targeted him in some ways, I think, is the idea. And they hit it off at this event when she changes into a dress after her shift, and he sweeps her off her feet and takes her to his private island, and craziness ensues.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of the movie Blink Twice?
So a good, attractive cast and good production design will get you a long way with me. Not all the way to being like, this is a successful movie, but the word on this was not great. And
it's been very polarizing, divisive.
Yeah. And so I think I went in with pretty low expectations. And then I was like, oh, hey, Simon Rex is here. Oh, hey, that's Christian Slater. Like, what's going on? And it did look very cool. And the music cues are great. And I don't know what it's about ultimately. I mean, I do. But
I was hoping we could talk about it a little bit.
But it's like pretty thin what it's about. So I didn't have a bad time.
Yeah. The phrase that popped into my mind after seeing it, and this was the second time I'd seen it. I'd seen it some time ago, and I just saw it recently this weekend for a second time. And the phrase that popped into my head was right ingredients and wrong recipe. That, like, when you look at all of the component parts, if you look at the cast, if you look at the way that the movie is shot, it looks beautiful. If you look at the way that it's cut with a razor's edge, if you look at the energy and the tension that is built up through the first 45, 50 minutes of the movie where the mystery is sort of unraveling about where we are and what's really happening in this place, it's really, it's pretty impressive for a debut. It's got great sound design. And then, especially seeing it the second time, before we get into the plotting and the story, which I think is very leaky, you see like a real over-reliance on technique to mask content, like meaning. The movie is edited so sharply, I think, because we don't have more than 2 or 3 scenes in the whole movie where 2 characters are talking to each other one-to-one for more than 90 seconds. Right. And that's a sign of a movie that's really been chopped up to kind of provide an energy. There's a lot of montage. There's a lot of insert shots.
Or that's a sign of a movie that's targeted at people under the age of 30.
Well, that's interesting. Maybe that is the case. Maybe that was the intention, but it did feel to me like a movie that had been really gone through the meat grinder of editing in an effort to keep an energy high where it otherwise could have sunk. I thought the cast was fun. I thought they all worked pretty well. Adria Arjona in particular to me popped in this movie. Obviously I really like her, but she has what could have been a nothing part as the sidekick enemy who becomes a co-conspirator. And I thought did a lot with it. It was very funny.
Yes.
I think part of the problem with the movie is it's just like tremendously predictable what is actually going on, just not the extent to which it's actually going on. Like, it's obvious that
Right.
there's something nefarious happening at this island. This is obviously a stand-in for Epstein Island. Like, if you don't realize that when you're watching the movie, maybe you just have never heard the words Jeffrey Epstein, but
Right.
otherwise you're like, okay, this is going to go bad. How is it going to go bad? And it certainly seems like this guy who's too good to be true is too good to be true.
Yeah.
So if you accept that in your movie brain, what do we actually have here? Like, what is it that we've actually picked apart?
Well, I guess there is ultimately a last second reveal.
The end?
The end that is maybe so supposed to represent some sort of, I mean, it's a twist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether it's supposed to be some sort of vindication or, upending of what you've taken away from this movie or this experience. Again, it's another thing where it's not really founded in very much that's happening in the first hour and a half of the movie. So you're just kind of like, okay. And the movie's pretty literal, Like all of it is just kind of like, this is what's happening. And this seems like a bad situation. And it seems like Epstein Island. Like, yes, you were right. And then you see the gruesome things. Like, well, you don't totally see it. You see very brief seconds, and they are upsetting. And I think that's another thing where to show any more of the violent sexual assault that's just kind of rampant at some point after the potion takes hold, whatever the potion is. It's not the snake venom. The snake venom
that reveals the truth. So let's put some spoiler fencing around this, because I think you can't really talk about the movie without talking about what actually transpires in it. So if you haven't seen the movie or you don't want to know what happens in the movie, we're going to spoil the second half, particularly of Blink Twice, which essentially there are two potions at play. There's Desideria, which is a perfume that is given out to all of the women on the island that has them forget whatever it is that has recently transpired. So whenever these terrible things that are happening on the island at night are happening, the perfume allows them to forget the trauma and then go on to the next day on the island. The snake venom, which is given to Naomi Ackie's character at a certain point by one of the women who is working on the island and as part of the cleaning service, we learned that this woman who's working in the cleaning service has seen Naomi Ackie's character before, that she's been to the island before. She keeps calling her Red Rabbit because of what she's wearing on her nails in a flashback that we later see in the film. And so she gives her the liquid from the snake venom, and that liquid combats this potion that makes you forget everything.
Right.
And it brings all of her memories back. So you've got these two magically real elixirs that are working against each other and allowing women who have been assaulted on this island by this group of men to reconcile, to reckon with these terrible things that have been happening. Now, obviously, the movie itself is this big stand-in for Me Too, for the kind of sexual and violence incurred upon women, hundreds of years, but more specifically, like in our culture, the last 10, 15, 20 years, a lot that has been revealed in the last decade. And the movie is just like very blunt and perhaps
it sort
empty.
of is a metaphor, but it's not really a metaphor. It's just a thing that's happening.
Yeah, it's a literalization of the idea with magic around it. I've seen the movie unfavorably compared to Get Out. I think that's reasonable. It does feel like a movie that someone started thinking about in like 2015 rather than in 2024. You can't hold that against the movie too much. Like, if a movie's in development, so be it. I did really hate the usage of Polaroid photographs as like a critical turning point, where I felt like Get Out, which also used Polaroid photographs as a critical turning point in the telling of the story, but also seemed to almost be like parodying the usage of something like that kind of a revelation. And in this movie, it just played super straight. It reminded me a lot of Promising Young Woman, where it's like, of course, like sexual violence is horrifying, and our culture's doing a lot to kind of catch up to what's been going on behind the scenes with people in power. But a movie like this, which is ultimately just like a very simple thriller, it seems like it's having some sort of like girl boss reckoning with how women can take power back.
Well, yeah, because the ending is that at some point, Naomi Ackie's character remembers everything. There's a series of standoffs. And like half truth telling where, Channing Tatum's character, who is the ringleader, confronts one of the other men and is like, well, you were going along with it, but they're both like bleeding out. And then Gina Davis, who is very funny as the assistant, is like, maybe I didn't want to take the snake venom. Maybe I never wanted to, so like these archetypal characters are all supposed to have their moment of realization. But to your point, it's cut very fast with like things being lit on fire and you're not really sure who's had what venom recently. And so you're like, are you in danger? Are you remembering things? Like, where is the chair? There's just like a lot going on. And then cut to the same event, or at least the same location. And again, like it's like that whole production design, like there's a very cool, memorable place. But
it's like a gala in all white.
And you're expecting Channing Tatum's like tech company to be the host, but instead it is Naomi Ackie's tech company, and her husband Channing Tatum's character is there as like like half his brain appears to be working.
A zombified Desideria.
And so she has gotten revenge by taking over and putting herself in place at the head of the table. And then
so what does that mean?
I don't know. We did it. We got
right. What did we do?
I mean, I don't know. Now we're in charge of a weird tech company.
Like we married abusers to have money.
I mean, that's the other just sort of half-baked nature of all of this is like he's definitely in charge of. He's some sort of like Elon Musk, Epstein, like
style
money,
like Jack Dorsey from Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tech adjacent figure, and so we're supposed to be wary of these sorts of people, but like, why? Beyond the fact that they just take planes full of women to islands, which I mean, I guess that's the moral of the story. Don't go to an island with a rich person.
That's sort of what I'm saying, where it's like, absolutely, Jeffrey Epstein, who died in prison, should have died in prison. Like, no argument there. Like, I don't, it's one of those things where it's like, what is this really a parable about?
Right. And like, what are all the other, like, Haley Joel Osment, it's very funny casting. There is like sort of a version of himself also.
Yeah.
Or like child actor like gone wrong and he's like going through divorce and he's only allowed to eat eggs. Like that's a funny little Hollywood sketch. But like why any of those men are there or what you're supposed to learn about or care about them. Simon Rex is just like keeps trying to make sushi for people.
Yes.
And that's funny.
Yes. He's a personal chef. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a choice that has been made, and I know this movie's been in production for a long time. So most of the actors, all of the actors, are well-known and memorable people that you've seen before.
Right.
Channing Tatum, Christian Slater, Simon Rex, Haley Joel Osment, Kyle MacLachlan. These are men that we've seen before. The only other man, the Lucas character, is actually Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman's son, Maya Hawke's brother.
Oh.
And he also is a victim in this story. He is the one man who has been given the Desideria. And all the women, I would say with the exception of Gina Davis and Aleya Shawkat, are people maybe you haven't seen as much. The two other friends who they meet there, along with Naomi Ackie, who has been in she was Whitney Houston in I Just Want to Love Somebody and I Just Want to Dance with Somebody, and she was in Star Wars, but she's not super famous. Adria Arjona was not super famous when this movie was being made. And so the kind of like anonymity of the female stars versus the clear like cultural import of the male stars feels like a very purposeful choice. But like it just doesn't add up to anything other than like, absolutely, Me Too is fucking horrible. Like I totally agree. And then what?
I mean, I agree with you. And Promising Young Woman is like an apt comparison, even though that was like a little more in the traditional like rape revenge turned on its head model.
Yeah.
Which honestly I think makes it a worse movie in some ways because the ending is like, really? Like what am I supposed to take away from this? This one is just kind of like pointing at the thing and being like, pretty bad, huh? And we're all like, yeah, pretty bad. But, I didn't need to go see this movie to know that.
Yeah. I guess it just doesn't do what a lot of the more successful films like this do, which is that they get you thinking more about the issue, get you thinking more about the idea, more about the way that society operates and why things are the way that they are. This one kind of had me thinking less. This one kind of had me thinking like, well, maybe power is the answer. And then that's all. That's like really all that you have to say. And just just work as hard as you can to get power.
Right.
And maybe that is the answer. Maybe that is the revelation. I mean, Zoe Kravitz is a lot more proximate to power than I am. So maybe she understands that the only thing to do is to poison your enemies and take their money.
I guess so. And their islands.
This movie, like, as a filmmaker, I think shows an incredible amount of promise.
Totally.
Like, there's some really cool stuff in the movie. I just found myself, especially seeing it the second time, I was like, so what? Really, I want to know what they're trying to say. And I couldn't get anything out of it.
I think they're saying that sexual assault's really bad. Okay. And it is.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. This
is a nice segue to Cuckoo.
Okay, well, what is that? What is this movie about? Respectfully, respectfully.
I was hoping you would try to explain what it is about, but I do think that that's a little bit that could be complicated.
No. Let me do it. So, like, I saw this movie. I saw the whole movie. I didn't fall asleep. I didn't go to the bathroom.
Okay.
I didn't look at my phone.
Okay.
I watched it. Okay.
I'll set the table. It's written and directed by Tillman Singer, a director who directed a film 4 or 5 years ago called Lose, which Adam Naiman was a big supporter of that film. He really liked that. It's Hunter Schafer's first starring role in a movie, and also features Jessica Henwick, Dan Stevens. What is Cuckoo?
So, and also, like, it has a lot of recognizable, even to me, tropes, right? It's young woman, Hunter Schafer, gets sent to the other half of her family in an idyllic alpine resort somewhere in Europe, Germany.
I believe Germany, the Bavarian Alps. Yeah.
Sure, because Dan Stevens is just like locked into his weird Dan Stevens accent, a great German accent. Oh my God, he's so good. You know, it's just what a strange
He's delightful.
Man.
My favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, of course. And so she has been removed from. She's been sent to live with her dad, who's the parent she's not as close to, and
he's remarried. He's got a kid.
Yeah, and so they're at this alpine estate, and that's also like a resort. And she's unhappy to be there, and keeps leaving her mom voicemails, being like, "Mom, I don't know about this." But they put her to work at the resort. She's working the front desk. Again, great production design, very cool looking resort that I would never stay at because it's immediately clear that weird things are going to happen. And weird things do start happening in the form of, like, you know, beautiful young guests coming into basically just the lobby always and barfing and then leaving.
Yeah. But not relatable to you right now at this stage of your life?
Okay, so we'll get there because there is a lot going on. And then sometimes there's a sound.
Mm-hmm.
And
kind of screaming, a kind of high-pitched sound.
Right. And also like a close-up on the larynx. Is that the correct biological term?
Kind of pulsating throat.
Yeah. And sometimes people are barfing because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're just barfing because of altitude, because of other things going on in their body.
Well, historically, the Bavarian Alps are seen as this place. There's a movie, the Gore Verbinski movie, A Cure for Wellness, also set in this place where there's sort of these naturally occurring waters, and you're able to kind of like become revivified by spending time. Healing. Yes,
sure. I prefer all the olden healing places that are at the ocean, but that's just me.
Understood.
Okay. So weird things are happening, and Dan Stevens won't let Hunter Schafer work the night shift or use her bike to get home. And then like a hot woman comes to the resort and wants to hit on Hunter Schafer, and that woman was really beautiful. And then she does work the night shift anyway. And at some point, her sister, her little sister,
her half sister Alma,
starts doing the larynx thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some other guys who show up at the resort.
You're doing great.
And we're like, weird things are happening here. And Hunter Schafer's like, no shit. And it's revealed that she's leaving voicemails to her mom, who has died. And she tries to escape with the hot woman. And they get pulled back. And I don't remember what happens for a little while. And then at some point, they're all part of this science experiment that Dan Stevens, which is like also obvious. Like from the very beginning, it's like, oh, Dan Stevens is a scientist who's doing weird things here, and you're all trapped. So at some point, the nature of the experiment is revealed. And it's like, oh. And there's also a special honeymoon suite where some really bad stuff is happening.
I think you should explain what the cuckoo is, or I can help you explain.
I honestly don't know, because they started talking about birds, you know, and it's like Dan Stevens in a German accent being like, let me tell you about birds. And I know people love to bird, you know, and I know that
that's not what this movie's about.
I know, but as soon as I have to start caring about birds, I'm just like, I'm not listening anymore. So it's just like, there's a German bird that also replicates. And so I don't know. I stopped listening. I don't care.
Bob, have you seen Cuckoo?
I haven't seen Cuckoo yet, but I mean, Amanda has been on the record for months and months and months, perhaps even years, that she doesn't give a shit about birds and she doesn't like them.
I know.
I don't trust them. I like, and this, I guess, movie proves it.
Yes.
But it's just,
I don't think you've adequately explained how birds come into the picture. I know,
because they started saying like there are these special birds in the German forest, and I was like, Jesus Christ.
I think the bird is like,
go have an ice cream sundae.
kind of like more of an ancient talismanic.
I mean, they always are.
They're like a creature's soul that inhabits the human body and controls it and makes it like this sort of monster.
But there's also like they make you look at like a wood etching of a bird at some point.
There is some literalizing.
Like, here is something about a bird, right?
Yes.
And it's just like in, what was that? The Watchers, when they're just like, here is the lore of the local fairies in the woods. And that's when I am like, I am out.
Right.
Anything hand-drawn telling me about some local lore.
So many of the films that we're talking about today, The Watchers, which came out in June, certainly Blink Twice, and this movie, on paper, I'm like, yes, an original genre story about freaky shit made by interesting young filmmakers. That's kind of what I beg for every week, right?
As soon as someone gets out their notebook, right? And they're like, here's all my research that I've been doing about the local creature who lives in the woods.
Yeah.
I'm out.
I mean, the creature is, inhabits human bodies, and they are trying to like pass on this sort of like infection through a goo that comes from, you have to be a woman to be infected. You pick up on the goo, the sort of like, almost like a semen-like secretion.
So I thought that there was also like there's like a surrogacy or like, it's another basically like pregnancy and reproduction is a nightmare situation, which, amen. Let the people know.
And
but
Alma, Hunter Schafer's character's Gretchen's younger half-sister, is meant to be like the lead the final cuckoo, like the cuckoo to end all cuckoos.
So they're like basically mating. Or they're like
trying to like impregnate her effectively, like transform her.
And like, so create like a human cuckoo hybrid and using the mother as like the vessel, because they haven't figured out
and
that
to like lead an army. It's one of those. So look, this is Euro horror, right? Like Euro horror is just different from American horror movies. There is a particular brand of filmmaker who's usually very eccentric but very focused on visuals, tension, and that kind of like creeping dread. There are a lot of examples. You've probably heard me use the name Dario Argento on this show before. This movie is very influenced by Dario Argento. Zulawski, who made Possession, is somebody who popped into my head watching this. Movies like The Wicker Man, movies where you're watching the movie and you're like, I know I'm scared. I know I feel uncomfortable. I have no idea what's going on. Like, plotting is sort of like a fallacy in the storytelling. Like, it almost doesn't really matter the logic of the story as long as you feel subsumed by the feeling of dread, anxiety, fear, concern, whatever it may be. So this movie is like very much in the tradition of those kinds of movies. I would say it's like pretty successful. It's not. It's really like it's cool to compare a movie like this to Blink Twice, which is a big fancy movie star movie made by a famous person, made by the heir to a very famous couple, with lots of well-known figures and a major studio behind it. That's an Amazon movie. This is a neon movie, so ostensibly it should be cooler and it should be more cutting edge. But they have a lot in common, where you're sort of like, some of this is really effective.
Right. And like, I knew that this was going to end with like Dan Stevens wilding out.
Yes, it's very predictable.
In a creepily lit European hallway.
Yes.
And it looked great.
The actual events are not predictable, but the end point is very predictable.
Yeah.
And so I think I really, really wanted to like this movie. I was like, well, this is the exact kind of thing that I go in being like, I know all the reference points. This is a filmmaker with a real visual style. Stuff like the pulsating neck thing. I'm like, that's cool. Never seen that. You know, like he keeps showing you that, and you're like, that's gross. That's weird. What is really happening
right? And
here?
then, but then people just vomit.
People just vomit. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a body horror. You know,
I know, but it's just like people vomit all the time. You guys get
You're not grossed out by it.
No, I mean, no, not right now.
Okay.
You know,
it's
a fact of life.
What did you think of Hunter Schafer?
I did have the thought to myself, and I had time for thoughts.
Have it for all of us now.
During this movie, it was really a question I posed to myself was, are we sure that anyone from Euphoria can act? Or are they all just coasting on the most immaculate vibes? And I would say that her vibes are spot on. And as like a confused, slightly surly American teenager transported to this weird as fuck resort, being told by German Dan Stevens that she can't bike, like I understood where she was coming from. But it was sort of the vibe and nothing more. And then I think you could apply that to many of the other actors who we've come to know and love. Maybe all you need is a vibe.
Watching her, I did think a lot of your personal aggravation with the affectations of Gen Z.
I mean, I wake up, you know, that is true. Like all of just like wake up. But, you know, that's not what their drugs are doing. So
yeah,
I'm not implying that Hunter Schafer is on drugs right now. It's just sort of that the vibe of Gen Z is.
I mean, she's made a choice, or the director's made a choice to have her just be incredibly flat in the film. And even its incredibly scary moments, she feels flat. She shows more range and color, I think, in Euphoria. We'll see. I'm kind of curious because I like her and she has like such a striking presence. But she's okay. I would. That's not how I would have framed that character. I don't think personally. But yeah, I would. I really wish this movie was better. I really wanted to like it a lot more than I did, unfortunately. But I did like it a lot more than The Crow, which I'm going to tell you about right now.
Yeah, I did. I didn't get a chance to see this one.
This film is directed by Rupert Sanders.
He of Snow White and the Huntsman.
Yeah, L'Affaire,
Us Weekly. Yeah.
This, of course, is a remake of the now, I think, legendary 90s cult film starring Brandon Lee, where he was tragically accidentally killed on the set during the making of the movie. The movie was completed. Chad Stahelski, director of the John Wick films, actually was his stunt double, and he went on to be the person whose body you saw in a lot of the sequences in The Crow. I've never been a big fan of The Crow in the 90s, but I do understand why people like it. It's this kind of like goth, grunge era trademark, and has an amazing soundtrack. But the lore doesn't really mean anything to me. It's not, the original film is not a very faithful adaptation of the graphic novel. I think the intention for this movie, which has been in development for years and years, was to kind of right that wrong, that it would be truer to the original work by James O'Barr, which is that graphic novel is an interesting story. It's like he lost his fiance in a drunk driving car crash, and he wrote this story to kind of like work through his feelings about that. This new movie stars Bill Skarsgård and FKA Twigs and Danny Houston, which, speaking of signposts, like if he shows up, is he going to be bad? Yeah, he's bad. He's bad. Danny Houston is a bad guy. He's the bad guy. There's an alternate universe where either Bradley Cooper, Luke Evans, Jack Houston, or Jason Momoa are starring as Eric Draven.
Oh, sure.
The Crow.
Yeah.
They were all attached to this at certain points in development.
Okay.
Bradley Cooper as the Crow is the funniest thing I've ever heard. I would watch today. That's not what we get. Bill Skarsgård, who's doing his like dead man
Creepy
living
hot
routine.
thing, yeah.
Like this is sort of what he does now. I like him. I don't think he's miscast, but I think this script is really bad, and I really thought this movie was quite poor. It doesn't really seem like a movie that understands why it wants to exist. It's also an incredibly telegraphed story about a person who's come back from the dead, who is going to seek revenge on the murder of their beloved. The world that they build around it, which is sort of like Danny Houston's character has this ability to whisper something into someone's ear, and then that makes them want to go crazy and kill themselves. Is just not very like cinematically interesting. It's just like somebody just whispering into someone's ear, and then they off themselves, but we very rarely even see how they do it on screen. Not that scary. Don't really understand that power. didn't have it explained to me. The whole like how Eric Draven comes back from the dead is weird. There's a wildly violent, almost self-parodic shootout at an opera that happens late in the movie that I didn't understand and felt stylized just for the sake of it. It felt like a post-Matrix, Bowling for Columbine, like kind of a movie sequence where I was like, this is just a video game in a movie that otherwise is all about like brooding Sarsgaard not talking or being compelling. Thought it was a huge miss.
Yeah.
America agreed. This movie
like literally
bombed
no
hard.
one saw it.
Nobody saw this
Once
movie.
again, I mean, a crow is a bird, so.
Wow.
I just, it was right there on the label.
Jeez. What about like Fly Away Home? You know what I mean? Like, what about like a more warm story about a bird? You know?
What is Fly Away Home? Oh, I did see the Anna Paquin and that was so nice.
That's a great film.
Yeah.
So you're on board for something like that? Yeah.
Well, that brings the family together also.
Okay.
I need a human element to the birds. What is like a bird that you actually like and trust?
I love birds. What do you mean? All birds are beautiful. Birds can fly.
Yeah.
Do you know how remarkable that is?
I would love to be able to fly, but no, that's very cool. But they're just up to no good with it. You know what I mean?
I don't. I really don't know what you mean. You're afraid of something that isn't going to hurt you.
They're organizing. Oh, you don't know that. I mean, like, maybe they're waiting, but also.
But the crow is an avenging angel. I mean, he's not hurt. He's only hurting bad guys. Wouldn't you want someone like him on your side?
I mean, as opposed to against me, yes.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Crows are like real crows are kind of creepy.
Crows are.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
they're
crows
just
are.
listen.
You're right.
I understand a lot of this is like implanted in my mind by a Hitchcock, but it's like they're menacing creatures.
I'm out on crows. I'm out on vultures.
Yeah, obviously.
I'm out.
Ravens.
Ravens. Yeah, I mean they're poetic animals. Like
Sure.
we have to kind of respect their standing in the genre history. I think that's it.
Does Edgar Allan Poe get too much respect? My next episode of JMO.
You gotta take that. That's off feed. That's like some sort of weird live event.
Oh, Telltale Heart.
Yeah.
That shit did fuck me up in 8th grade. So.
Incredible story.
Yeah. It was good.
Do you have a least favorite of his stories?
I mean, I can really only do Telltale Heart and Raven.
What about the Cask of Amontillado?
Oh my God. I forgot
incredible.
about that.
You're a wine enthusiast. Come on.
And a great title also. Okay, so that's
a great
3.
Story. What about The Pit and the Pendulum?
Like you're trying to deep cut Edgar Allan Poe to
Pit
me
and the
right
Pendulum.
now?
That's a classic. There was a Roger Corman version of that story.
Okay.
The Tomb of Ligeia.
No, I don't know these. I think I just got the Cliff Notes versions.
Man, I loved Edgar Allan Poe, as you might imagine. I haven't read any of his stories in a long time. I'm starting to think about this with having a kid. I'm like, am I going to be disappointed going back? You know what's a big hit right now is the Greek myths book about all of the women of Greek myths with Alice.
So not Dolores?
This is the first. No. But
I'm just going to buy it for her.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
But like Daphne and Persephone and Circe and all of those figures, this is the first book we've been reading.
So she
doesn't have a lot of pictures.
She is doing like Greek mythology, the Disney princess version?
More or less. It's like a kid's version of those stories, but it's not. It's still like Daphne just like straight up rejects Apollo and turns into a tree.
Yeah.
Like it is not sugarcoating any of that story. She's like, I'm an independent woman and also I'm a tree. That story is wild.
They're all really messed up.
Anyway, I won't be showing her The Crow anytime soon.
Okay.
The original, I rewatched it. All the supporting actors are really good, and the vibe is there, to your point earlier. But also another movie where I'm like, what is this movie about? You shouldn't be a gangster? And maybe that doesn't matter. This reminds me of our conversations about the holdovers where everyone was mad that we were like, I wish this was about more. Like sometimes it's okay for a movie to just be about being entertained. I understand. I was not entertained by Borderlands.
No, I went in for 10 minutes.
Did you?
Yeah, and I was like,
You gave it a try.
I don't understand what's happening here. Yes.
This is a very hard movie to talk about. In theory, it's one of the biggest movies of the year because on paper it stars Cate Blanchett, Kevin Hart, Jack Black, Edgar Ramirez, and Jamie Lee Curtis. It's based on a very popular video game franchise. It was more popular some years ago than it is now, but it's still very well known.
Have you played it?
I've never played it before.
What's the setup of the...
I don't know. I don't know anything about the game. Only about the story that I learned
Thank you, everyone, for coming to the big picture.
Well, but this is not a video game pod, right? I haven't meaningfully played video games in 15, 20 years. But it was originally going to be written by Craig Mazin and directed by Eli Roth. Craig Mazin,
Sure.
Creator of the Last of Us TV series, one of the best TV writers of the last 10 years, created Chernobyl. His name's no longer on the film. Someone named Joe Crombie is credited with a screenplay. Sure sounds like a pseudonym for Craig Mazin. Eli Roth was hired to direct and co-write the movie. Eli Roth was a guest on the show last year. At some point, a news story broke earlier this year, or maybe late last year, that he had, quote unquote, left the film, and that Tim Miller, who had directed Deadpool and Terminator Dark Fate, was coming in to work on what had already been shot. I think Cate Blanchett only did the movie because she liked working with Eli on the House with Clocks in Its Walls. Jack Black voices a robot in the movie. He came back because he was also in-house. So they were trying to make a crazy Eli Roth movie, like a zany exploitation movie with a $100 million budget. It sounds like the studio didn't like that movie that he was making. So he's off the movie. They bring in Tim Miller. And then the movie that they released is the most bland nothing of a, fourth wave Guardians of the Galaxy ripoff. Like, it has no character, no personality. The arcs are boring. The performances are flat. The production design isn't that good. Like, it's just like, it feels like you're watching a parody of a fake movie inside of a movie about the making of a movie. It feels like the movie from The Fall Guy.
Or it feels like the movie at the end of Tar. As I saw many people joke that the movie that Cate Blanchett's character has gone to conduct the soundtrack for.
I don't think that was a movie. I think that was a video game.
Okay.
So so maybe you're right. Maybe that's what it is.
Not in an original
Not
thought,
actually meant that way.
Because I think some of this was filmed before Tar.
It was.
Right?
I think it was filmed in 2021 is when they started production. Then they had to stop, and then they went back into production. This is a $100 million movie. It doesn't look good. It's not fun.
Very bad.
It's like 87 minutes. It's just a complete
Literally
fiasco.
No one saw it.
Yeah. It's probably the biggest bomb of the year, given its budget.
Well, my Cate Blanchett fan account was still having a great time. So with the press, because she did her 3 obligated press things.
What did she say?
She was just talking about. I think everyone went out of their way to not acknowledge that it was for this movie.
Oh,
so she was with Gina Gershon at some point, and they looked great. And I really only get the clips that are about Cate Blanchett responding to the gay community and being an icon and being delighted about it. So, or the merch, which I'm thinking about buying. But
I saw someone note that in the film she walks just like a video game character.
Okay.
Which apparently was from deep study that Cate Blanchett did around how video game characters move, which I respect. There was a part of me that wanted to do a movie star playbook for Cate Blanchett and be why did you do Borderlands? But it's like she just made Tar. That's in the conversation for best movie of the decade. Another movie that I was like, I really wish this was good. Wouldn't it be nice if this was fun?
It would be better if it were good than bad.
I have a little bit of a Kevin Hart allergy.
Okay.
I don't really
like
him in movies.
He was not funny.
He's just not very funny in movies. He's pretty funny in stand-up, and I understand why he's a wildly successful person, but he wasn't funny in this movie at all.
What does Cate Blanchett have coming up? Oh, this Soderbergh heist.
Yes, Black Bag.
Can't wait.
I think she may have one other cool project.
With Tom Burke, Marissa Bella, and Michael Fassbender. Ooh, Pierce Brosnan's in this too?
Huge for you.
Wow.
This is very exciting.
This is really, really exciting.
I think there's another project.
Oh, she has the Quaron.
Disclaimer. That's what it is. The Apple TV Plus show. You gonna watch that?
Yeah, I have Apple TV. So, that's more than most people can say. So, I'll check it out.
Man. A lot of bad movies.
Yeah, this was tough.
Now, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about this movie.
So, okay, Strange Darling. Yeah, you set the scene.
Strange Darling, as I mentioned at the top of the show, written and directed by J.T. Molnar. He had directed a film some years ago that played at Sundance in 2016 and hadn't made a movie for years. He made a Western in 2016. This is his first feature. He befriended Giovanni Ribisi, and they were both camera nerds. They liked talking about tech and the way that films look, and they got really into Technicolor film, and they started, they got along really well. So they talked about the idea of making a movie together. So Molnar writes this script, and they're going to make this movie. It stars Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner, with appearances by Barbara Hershey and Ed Begley Jr. But Willa Fitzgerald is more or less unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Gallner, I think, is gaining a bit of a reputation as a kind of genre anti-hero. I first saw him in Veronica Mars 10 years ago. It's a cat and mouse thriller. There's an introduction at the beginning of the movie, a voiceover done by Jason Patrick setting up the premise of this serial killer in the Pacific Northwest and the kind of rampage that they'd been on, and that this is sort of the final days of this serial killer's run. And then the story starts. Now, we can't talk about the movie without spoiling it at all. So we can talk
even what I want to say to you in some ways.
We'll spoil something.
We'll spoil it. And it's like, we all saw Chris on Saturday and he was maybe going to go see this. And I was like, I can't even say you can't say it.
Talk about it.
So if you want it, if you're going to go see it, just don't.
Yes.
Just don't listen to us.
It's very much in the molds of when we talked about Barbarian, where we were like, if you want to see this movie, just go see it. Don't hear anybody say anything about it. This one is the same. Not because it's like the most mind-blowing twists of all time are coming, but it is a movie designed to upend your expectations.
Yes. And you want that moment of going, huh?
Right.
So the thing I'll say to you is that I saw this 12 hours after rewatching Gone Girl.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh, this is not actually served by having watched Gone Girl ahead of time. And that spoils a lot of what happens in the movie, right? But I did see it coming very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Now hold on. We will spoil Strange Darling now, but I have some questions for you about it because I really liked this movie. I saw it many, many months ago. Someone reached out to me who was just like, I know your movie tastes really well. I really think you're going to respond to this. It's a really small movie. It's from a new studio, Magenta Light Studios. It's backed by some powerful people, but like it's Giovanni Ribisi shot it. It's this guy you've never heard of who made it. It's a small cast. Like, just check it out. Tell me if you like it. And I watched it and I was like, oh, this is an incredible surprise.
Yes.
How nice to have a movie where I had no expectations. I'd never seen a trailer, didn't have a poster, nothing. Sat down, watched it, liked it. Liked the surprise. You, I think, knew at least the framing of don't know anything going in, right? Did you know that?
I don't know whether it was like that.
It hadn't been spelled out for you?
Spelled out for me in that way.
I only ask because I think that people who are saying that are doing it for a good reason, but it weirdly also works against the viewer.
It sets up that you're looking for something.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you had that sensation when you were sitting down for it, because I had no preconceived notions, and I wouldn't say I was stunned when I saw the reveal.
I don't think it was that necessarily. Obviously, like Gone Girl was on the brain, and there is a twist in Gone Girl that in a lot of ways is very similar to the twist in this movie and what it is using in terms of our expectations about movies, about serial killers, about
sexuality,
about power, about all of these things. So when I say that it doesn't help, it means I guess I was a little more looking for a twist.
Mm-hmm.
But I will also say that Gone Girl with its like mega pop meta textualization is like a little bit more Amanda's style, right? It is about what we think about Ben Affleck being a possibly murderous husband and true crime and Nancy Grace and and bestsellers of like endangered women and all these sorts of things.
It's a bit of an unfair comparison. This is a grungy exploitation movie.
And it just so happens that we screened that on Friday night and I went on Saturday. I think that, but obviously there is a similar twist, which, okay, spoiler, like it's the woman, not the man.
The movie sets you up to think that the man is the serial killer and it is the woman. These two people who are effectively on a date at the start of the movie.
But I think I do honestly think it was not because I was, in there with my like detective hat looking for a twist, but because respectfully, I mean, as you said, this is a new filmmaker. This is a very specific type of filmmaking. Now, the first 30 minutes, that's shot in 35 millimeter is like as big as the screen you're seeing it on. And it's doing like a disjointed narrative and the chapters are flipping while they're playing Chopin. And there's this like very, very obvious, like intentionally obvious score.
Big over-announced choices.
But it is so intentional and I'm like, my response was like, there has to be something going on here.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like, you can't.
I think that's why they did
You can't do something like this affected without it being purposeful.
I agree.
And then it was. And I still, for all of that, when the shoe kind of drops about 30, 40 minutes in, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I kind of thought so, but the way that they revealed it, and especially those scenes between Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gardner, where they're talking and they're kind of doing their like before sunset, but serial killer, were fascinating. Even if I was like a little irritated by them.
Yep. Which I think is also kind of the point.
Totally. Everything is
You're on an annoying date with these two people.
So intentional that I walked away being like, I really admired it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I still was surprised. And they still are like moving the pieces in ways that you don't expect for like a pretty for a serial killer film.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting point of comparison to Longlegs, which is a movie that has this huge burden of serial killer history on it, and is like the movie is thinking about the Silence of the Lambs as you're watching it. This isn't like that. This is like what cheapo 80s slasher serial killer movies are like, where, the practical effects are really bloody and gross, and the gunshots are really loud, and you've got these desperate people running through the woods, terrified to be slashed. Both Blink Twice and Strange Darling are these sort of sunshine horror movies. That's quite very difficult movies to make, like scary movies in bright light.
But a thing I loved.
Very, very effective. Midsommar is like a version of it. There's not a lot of versions of that. The movie ostentatiously and proudly announces that it's shot on 35, but it is beautiful. Yeah. And it really does have like a knack for exploring color, and the reds and the yellows and the blues are really loud. And they create like a kind of energy when you're watching a movie that you don't get when you're watching a movie. Gone Girl is kind of the opposite. It's this movie of like blurry grayness and like it's kind of murkiness and feeling. And like, that's very intentional. But this movie, I think if you try to apply the same standard that I was holding Blink Twice to, it will fall apart in a second. It's actually not built for anything other than wrong footing you and then getting you like kind of grossed out and tense around the conclusion of the story. Now, obviously, like JT is trying to say like, hey, let's not assume that every man who is in this position is this, or every woman who's in this position is this. Let's like think about what our expectations are of gender. Right. But that's kind of it, right? Like, there's not really anything else to the movie beyond that.
Yeah, no, it's
simple
just
dynamic.
Like it's just like girls can do it too.
Yes,
but I think the fact that the movie is so clearly trying to mess with you is like both a little annoying at times, but also that's the point of the movie. So I don't feel like I just got handed a lecture being like, did you know that women can also be serial killers? Like,
right. Okay. So what did you think about the choice to kind of flip around all the chapters and tell the story out of order?
I mean, I was like, again, I was irritated at first. And I was just like, oh.
It's been done many times.
It's been done many times. And it's like, it throws a lot of tricks at you all at once. Mm-hmm. But it does set up that nice moment of just being like, well, Barbara Hershey's still out there, and then, and it's like, I know enough to be like, okay, but like, where's Barbara Hershey? And I didn't quite expect Barbara Hershey to meet, the end that she does.
That's another really great choice is they've cast these two incredibly well-known people opposite these two lesser known people. And when they show up, you're like, oh, is the movie going to like pivot into their story somehow? Or is this them like 30 years later or something? Like it really kind of throws off your expectations. And then the kill reveal with Ed Begley Jr. is amazing. I mean, it's great. It's just a really fun pop moment in movie going. The reason I thought it would be fun though to talk about all of these movies together is because they all kind of have similar aims, which is to kind of disturb you with violence and show a kind of an ugliness in our social character. Like that's what the best genre storytelling can do. And Strange Darling is like really more of like a beautifully artistic stunt.
Yeah.
And not too much more than that. And I don't mean to denigrate the movie by saying that, but I think if you were expecting something, because movies like this invariably, because of people like me, go through a hype cycle in a big way. If you're expecting a little bit more than that, just like when you watch The Crow, if you're a fan of the original Crow, you're going to be like, I have expectations. If you're sitting down to watch Blink Twice, you're like, Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut is about Me Too. This is going to be amazing. Like all of these things are so important when you sit down to watch a movie. And so I think it's fun to see how they are talking to each other or not talking to each other. It's also so fascinating that August has become this repository for either fucked up failed movies or fucked up intriguing movies.
Movies we don't know what to do with.
Yeah.
Movies we don't know how to market.
Why is that?
Well, I guess they still think that no one is going to the movies the last couple weekends, which doesn't really seem true because it ends with us. This is making zillions of dollars still.
But that's the other
and
thing.
Deadpool as well.
Trap, It Ends With Us, and Alien Romulus are also, in their own ways,
Messed up
body horror,
movies.
serial killer, domestic violence. Like, there's all this social disorder in all of these movies that I find really interesting, and they're all
I do wonder. Everyone
August.
was like, "Let's get it out before we have to do election season," which turned out to be a little wrong this year.
Because it's a time of celebration, you would say?
Well,
you were at the DNC. What was it like?
It was great. Well, so I was.
That was why we took the week off.
I was on Beyonce's plane, and we turned around at the last minute because we just didn't. Your attention was already there. Yeah. We didn't need to.
I wrote Gretchen Whitmer's speech. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah, I'm really proud of it. Got a good reaction.
Well, no, but I do think if you're planning 6 months in advance in 2024, you don't want to be. I think everyone thought pretty hard about what they were putting out in September, October, November. I mean, you have observed that there's not a movie scheduled for election week.
There's still not. There's not a wide release movie coming out November 8th.
And maybe that's just a basic, I think, accurate understanding is that people's attention will be elsewhere.
It made me want to look back historically at what movies were released when presidential elections were happening, because that's a movie going time.
Yeah,
the first couple of weeks in November, historically you see some bigger stuff coming out then, leading up to the holidays. It's fascinating,
right? Award stuff also. Mm-hmm. It's when it starts trickling out, but it does kind of seem like they cleared the runway. But I don't know. I would not want to be out promoting a movie about messed up subjects while then also having to answer questions again. How do you feel that ties to the election? Blah blah blah. I mean, you don't want to be near it.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's just a one-off.
It's possible. I mean, there's a few examples we haven't even really talked about. We haven't talked about Kneecap yet. I don't know if you've had a chance to see that one. That's the Northern Irish story about a rap trio who do a lot of drugs and who are fighting for the Irish language, which is a really fun movie that I haven't seen since Sundance, but I was just talking to Aleya about it. That could have fit neatly into this conversation. There was something else, too, that we hadn't yet talked. Oh, well, so later this week, I'll have Jason Schwartzman and Nathan Silver on the show for Between the Temples, which is, ultimately a family dramedy, but has some very fucked up elements to it. And so I don't know what it is, what's in the water, but this month is just rippling with curiosities, I guess. I don't know. I for me, it's great. I wish some of these movies were better.
Yeah, and also they weren't widely seen,
They weren't. You think this podcast will be widely heard?
Well, let's just put Oasis at the top. Let's put just our plea for Oasis
the Oasis
tickets.
episode. Okay, I'll think about that. Thanks to Aleya Zenieris. Thanks to our producer, Bobby Wagner. Thanks to Jack Sanders. Later this week, we're scaling Michael Keaton's Mount Rushmore with a special guest. Who's the guest?
It's our pal Griffin.
Griffin Newman is coming onto the show. Griffin said, Michael Keaton is my guy. And so I felt we had to ask him to do this. He's your guy too, though.
Well, in a different way, I think, than Griffin. Griffin is I do see the spiritual connection between their artistic pursuits. Mm-hmm. And I just think Michael Keaton is aging incredibly well. And I'm just I continue to be amazed. That is my guy. Don't you just want to spend time with him? I do.
I'm so happy for you both. I probably come somewhere right in the middle of you both. So we'll pick the essential roles and also our personal favorites. Okay. I think will be part of the mission of the episode. We'll see you later this week.